Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov gang. Tonight, Don Perlmutter, the director of the Symbol Intelligence Group and one of the leading subject matter experts in symbols, symbolic methodologies, unfamiliar customs, and ritualistic crimes. Don Perlmutter, welcome back to the Glazov gang.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Very profound article at Front Page Magazine recently on the Charlie Hebdo massacre, dealing with the meaning of blasphemy for jihadists. Let us begin with that, Don. What is your overall interpretation of why the murderers and jihadists killed those journalists?
Blasphemy is a very important concept in Islam, but it's not specific to Islam. And I think it's easier to understand if you think of it in terms of the anthropological explanation, which is basically that blasphemy is the profanation of sacred things. And that's cross-cultural. Every culture has some idea of the sacred, some idea of what's taboo. The difference with Islam is that theirs is very intertwined with the concept of purity rites. In fact, the whole jihadist idea is to cleanse Islam of the impurities of the West through violent struggle. So you have this concept of blasphemy, of things that are very sacred, and if they are portrayed in a taboo way, for example, the image of Muhammad and the Quran, there's very few sacred objects in Islam, so it makes it even more important. It's very connected to these rites of purity and the idea that it's felt in the same way that, for example, gangs would feel if they were dissed. That's a good way to understand it. Gangs are tribal cultures, and jihadists in Islam is a very tribal culture. And the idea is that Muhammad, for lack of a better expression, is like the leader. So if you dishonor the leader in any way, you need vengeance to restore the gang's respect. So that's a really good way to understand it.
Thank you, Don. And in terms of this respect, you refer to purity. And so when the cartoonists draw Muhammad in this way, the jihadists and also Muslims, according to their faith, believe that they have been contaminated. There's been an unclean contact with unbelievers. There's some kind of virus that they've caught.
Exactly. Purity rites, from an anthropological perspective, are understood as contagious evil. It's this idea, if you were to imagine somebody who's a germphobe, but multiply it times 10. It's a horrible feeling of humiliation, of shame. And again, it has to be understood in the context of this shame-honor culture. So the blasphemy is felt as an impure contagion. And it literally, because of the way they're inculcated with this concept, they literally feel contaminated, and that the only way they can restore this horrible feeling of shame and disrespect is through violence. And that's why the murder becomes righteous slaughter. Actually, the murder can be understood as a purification ritual. Purification rituals are ways to avenge the deity and to cleanse the community of unclean contact.
Well, we see the rationale for honor killings here as well.
Exactly.
So in other words, this is when the sacred is polluted by the impurity of unbelievers. And I'm taking this from your article. So Dawn, in other words, the cartoons made Muslims feel contaminated by unbelievers, and the only way they purify themselves and get rid of that contagious virus in them now is by cleaning themselves and the world in some way with the blood of the perpetrators.
Correct. It's a ritual purification, and you can see it even when it's not done to the extreme with murder. The Quran desecration controversies, even with people who are nonviolent, Muslims who are nonviolent, that evokes the same kind of deep-seated visceral reaction where they'll come out and protest, they'll burn effigies. It's just a concept that's very deep-seated, where it's felt in a way that I don't think we quite understand. And that's why the jihadists were yelling that they have to avenge the Prophet's honor. The Prophet's honor is equated with their honor and their shame. So by drawing the cartoons, we're shaming them, we're dissing them, and it has to be purified.
Dawn, why is this conversation not conducted on Anderson Cooper, on MSNBC? We don't see it in any higher literary culture. You're an expert here. You're giving a very profound, meaningful interpretation of why the journalists at Charlie Hebdo were killed, and we don't hear anything about this.
You don't see this conversation on MSNBC or NBC because it's part of a jihadist strategy that actually exploits these desecration controversies. They understand that blasphemy is a symbolic trigger that's going to evoke a lot of Muslim victimhood. So it functions two ways for jihadists. It functions as a method to incite people to violence, to gain sympathizers, but it also functions as a way to intimidate the West into cowing to this idea that we're somehow offending Muslims, and by constantly doing that, then it becomes laws. It becomes lawfare, in that we move our freedoms further away, and it's a very big strategy that's been very successfully used by the jihadists.
Well, you're absolutely right, Don. I mean, you can just call it every time because I study this. I've been studying this for years, and you see a jihad attack, and then it's like, okay, so when do our apologies begin? So, Charlie Hebdo massacre, and all of a sudden you watch the Western media, and everyone's like, oh, the Muslim youth, they don't feel a part of France, and they're unemployed, and they're frustrated. But in fact, it has something to do with what you're talking about, and perhaps everything to do in combination also with the teachings of the Hadith and Quran. But so let's get back to those teachings and crystallize this for our audience a bit. This concept of shame, this the context of impurity and being defiled, being contaminated. Tell us a little bit why you're interested in these matters and what meaning they have for you in your study of this field.
Well, I'm very familiar with these concepts of impurity and shame because of homicide cases that I've worked on. It's the same exact dynamic for other types of murderers. They always have some idea in their head of something that they think is sacred and has been violated, or that they've been disrespected, and they will perform a ritual murder to actually get those feelings of purity back. I mean, it's the exact same thing that I've seen with other types of cases. And the difference is, though, if, for example, you have a serial killer that for him, let's say the sacred is a person wearing something red, a red scarf. So he targets women with red scarves. Well, you don't have people going, oh, everybody should stop wearing red scarves so that we don't offend the serial killer. No, what you do is you have an undercover woman wearing a red scarf, and that's how you what you use to catch him. Um, that's what how we should be approaching the same issue. Instead of claiming that, oh, it's so offensive, we should be exploiting what is held sacred and taboo to our advantage. Instead, the jihadists are taking advantage of it.
And we're following Islamic blasphemy laws in terms of how we respond to these attacks by what we say and what we don't say.
Oh, absolutely. It's if you think about the same thing in the context of any other type of homicide case, it would seem utterly ridiculous that the offender would be treated this way or even spoken about this way. This is like a privileged class that again, it was a long-term strategy that has been extremely successful. And on the other hand, they understand the meaning of sacred and taboo when, for example, Islamic State invades, Iraq after killing the men, raping the women, and enslaving the children. The first thing they do is they destroy all the sacred architecture, objects of the Christian culture because they understand that if you annihilate everything that's held sacred, that's how you end up winning. They get it, we don't.
Don, your thoughts as an expert on these matters and, seeing this terrible massacre, knowing the causes of it, your thoughts on Obama's behavior?
At best, President Obama doesn't comprehend how to handle this type of situation. He's not a warrior president. At worst, he's literally perpetuating these ideas. I mean, he still will not name Islamic terrorism. It's like ridiculous at this point.
I think he was afraid and disinclined to take a stand against the murder of those cartoonists, and that's why he didn't go to the march.
Oh, absolutely, because he loves those type of things. I mean, that's usually the kind of we are the world type of event that he likes to be front and
Yeah.
center.
In other words, if he was at that march, he would have taken a stand and said, I am also Charlie Hebdo, and he doesn't want to go against Islamic theology, Islamic teachings, and the Muslim world on that realm, correct?
He's very protective of the Muslim world, and it's very disturbing.
And so he showed that he doesn't stand with those cartoonists and those journalists.
Oh, definitely. He showed he didn't stand with them. I mean, the fact that he was AWOL. I mean, watching football or something. No, today nobody even knows what he was doing.
Before our time is up, Don Perlmutter, conclude for us on the main significance of this terrible tragedy and this massacre perpetrated by Islamic Jihad and what was behind it.
Blasphemy is a very, very significant concept in Islam, not just theologically, but it is so successful in that it evokes these deep-seated emotions. And it hasn't just been these murders. I mean, there was a woman in Philadelphia, Jihad Jane, who has been imprisoned for her attempt to murder a cartoonist. The woman in Seattle who thought that she was taking this on with the everybody draw a picture of Muhammad Day. She had to go into hiding. I don't think the cartoonists completely understand what they're up against when they're doing this. I think in some ways they're not as much brave as they are naive, because if you're going to do something like this, you better have the right security. You better be armed. I mean, I don't think it's real until it's in their face. because it's that serious. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very hard for people to understand how this is felt, and it's
Yeah.
just like gangbangers that are going to get you because you have disrespected their leader.
Yeah, Don, I think, well, I would say, I think, look, it depends who we're talking about. I think that Charlie Hebdo, I think they definitely understood the risks they were taking. They had been threatened many times. Many of them are very brave, very shrewd. They know what they're up against, and they're just very brave people. And perhaps some others are quote unquote brave, but perhaps they underestimate what, what they're really triggering, and therefore they should be prepared for what's going to come down the line, in other words. So we definitely support these free speech people and the people who draw these cartoons out of bravery. I guess your point was that some of them may actually underestimate the consequences and the horror that's going to follow, and they should take more precautions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it were up to me, I really liked the idea of everybody drawing the Muhammad Day because a lot of people did, and they got some fabulous things. And you know, if all of the news reported this and showed the cartoons, and everybody just kept showing the images, that's the way to fight it. You
Yeah.
know, you have to do that. But when you only have a few doing it, they become targets.
And and you have to be aware that when you're doing it, you're going to face tremendous evil, and people will come to kill you. And that's not to criticize the people doing it; it's to shed light on the evil of those who resort to violence through feeling shamed and offended.
Yeah, it's like stealing a drug cartel's drugs.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that, you know, they are going to hunt you to the ends of the earth until they show everyone that you're not going to disrespect
yeah.
us.
And how unfortunate that our media and higher literary culture does not tell the truth about this the way that you so bravely do. And Don Perlmutter, thank you so much for being a truth teller in our world today on this issue.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, and we hope to see you again soon on the Glazov Gang. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night.